All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We're your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Thank you very much for listening. I know there's a lot of MMA related content out there, and I am. The fact that anyone listens to my ramblings is humbling, baffling on occasion, and motivating. So, thank you. Thank you all very much for that. I deeply appreciate it. Any interaction you can do with the product is, of course, appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, sharing on social media, or with people you know in real life. Either way, I'm good with any and all of that. And really, if you're not interested in that, or if you've done that and you're just listening, that's more than enough. So thank you. Time is our only truly finite resource, and you share a bit of yours with me. So I really do appreciate that. On the agenda this evening, last night, UFC on ESPN 62. I was down on this card on paper. You know what? I'll eat a little crow off the top here. In practice, not that bad. Not great, but for a generic fight night, honestly, not that bad. So we'll get into that in particular. And a few minor bits of news. It's been kind of a quiet week. And there's no UFC event in this upcoming week, so they might dump some news on us over the next 7 days, but we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, that's where we are. I think that's everything I've got here on my preamble. So let's jump into this, shall we? Hopefully this doesn't take too long. UFC on ESPN 62. Off the top, how did we do with predictions? I am so pissed at myself. I went 10-1. So full disclosure on two of those. I did not do the predictions for the tough finale fights last week because they weren't. The UFC hadn't listed them because they hadn't aired the final fights, so I didn't do a full prediction. Um, all I did was go with the favorites when I wrote my blurbs. And I do that the night before. Technically, it was early the morning of, but my insomnia is my own problem. And when I wrote my blurbs, Ryan Loder was the favorite over Robert Valentin. That shifted by the time the fight started, but if you want to go track the odds, please double check me. I'm not BSing you here. When I wrote my fight blurbs, Loder was a bit of not a huge, a slight favorite. And again, obviously batting just moved the line by the time they got in the cage, but Santos was always, I think, the favorite over Ulfi. Awfully, jeez, I'm just perpetually, I think, going to get that guy's last name wrong. Yeah, awfully. Ophelia? Jeez. Why can I not read that? Can't read my own writing. Let me double check. Just want to make sure I'm not. Yeah, awfully. OFLI. Okay, awfully. Ooh. I will get that right at some point in the future. But Santos was always the favorite over him, I'm pretty sure, at least when I checked. Loder, and as mentioned, Loder and Valentin swapped a little bit. But Loder was the favorite when I wrote my previews, blurbs, so I went with that. And I gave myself, I even gave myself an out, but I didn't change my mind before the fight started. After the first round or so of Hill and Ricci, I kind of went, okay, Ricci's going to get this. But that was the only one I got wrong. And man, I can't tell you guys how tempted I was to cheese that. To come out here and say, yay, had a perfect one. I changed my mind on, Hill and Ricci before they started fighting, and it just wouldn't have been true. But I should have known better. That one's killing me a little bit because I should have known better than to pick Angela Hill. Oh well. So ultimately 10-1. Now a lot of those were favorite picks, of course. A lot of those were favorites had a pretty good night, but hey, guess who picked the underdog Mearshart? Yeah, because I don't pick. I don't pick Edmund Shabazian to win fights at this point. Um, oh, there was one other one that switched. Dennis Bazookia's original opponent of Danny Silva fell out. He was replaced with Francis Marshall. I had just picked against Bazookia, so I let that stand. Um, and they also wound up moving up in weight because, in fairness, Marshall took that fight on less than a week's notice. So mostly just against Bazookia for that one. So dodged a bit of a bullet there if we're just looking at the numbers. But 10-1 for the whole card. Throwaway fight night, by and large, and that is my best result. So I think we're counting one fizzled because they announced a fight with Zygmantas. What is guy's Lithuanian? Yeah, Zygmantas Ramshka and Nathan Fletcher. Okay, I have to go on about this very briefly. They both weighed in. Some kind of a medical issue on Fletcher's part. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the big deal they made out of him suffering an injury on the last season of The Ultimate Fighter, on the last episode of The Ultimate Fighter. I know that was long enough ago that depending on what it was, he could have been healed, but still, what a weird way to play that. I mean, didn't they just like rebook it for Burns versus Brady in 2 weeks? Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that miss led to the first 30 minutes of this broadcast being essentially, hey, The Ultimate Fighter's great, which it isn't. I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me finish my prediction stuff here. So 10-1 year to date. Yeah, that's the okay. UFC on ABC 7. I went 12-1. His family had one loss. It's only the second time. So pointing there, I have one fizzled fight listed. Only the second time I've had one in the L column. And this one didn't bother me. That ABC card did not bother me as much as this one does. I should have known better than to pick Angela Hill. Really should have. Year to date, 246 and 104, 4-0 contests. So I'm going to jinx this a little bit. I'm better than 2-1 right now. We're over the halfway point. This could still bomb out. Like, I could still crash and burn badly in the back half of the year, but that's where we are at the moment. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. This is going well. This is going okay so far. It's going okay. All right. As for the fights themselves, I have to start with the pacing. Tough finale cards are historically badly paced. This was no exception to that. I understand you have a fight fallout that was a problem you created for yourselves, but I understand that fights fall out, you've got to vamp. Okay, I get it. I have some sympathy for that. It's just a bit unfortunate when the first 60 minutes plus of your broadcast, was more than an hour, features a whopping 62 seconds of fighting. I'll get to that fight when I get to it. It was the first fight of the night, and we'll get to it. But that's just bad pacing. And I know you can only push up warm-up times and when fighters are going to be ready to go so much. And I completely understand that, by the way. Um, but man, is it just a rough viewing experience when that happens. It just is. Um, so there was that. Then there's always the like double break between the finale fights. So before we got to, what was the first one? So after Michael Morales and Neil Magny, we get a commercial break. Then we come back, they talk and they air the hype package for Santos and Offley. Then a commercial break. Then we come back to that fight starts. Then we repeat that for the next fight. So that was Loader and Valentin. It's just rough pacing. It really is. And the fact that the broadcast knew that no one watched this season of The Ultimate Fighter, so there was a time in the past where you could get away with like, here's just what they've been doing since the finale. Now they like have to go, okay, so these are some of the fighters, and here was some of their journey because we know no one watched the show. Just, uh, it's just rough. If I wasn't, sitting here watching it as part of my job, it's probably not that bad if you can get up and go do something else for 10 minutes. But, it's just rough. But the pacing issue aside, we actually had some pretty solid action. So your main event, the best fight on the card, it got fight of the night, and it was the best fight on paper. Kyle Bahalio defeats Jared Cannonier via unanimous decision, 249-45 and a 48-46. So we got a unanimous 10-8 fifth round for Bahalio, and really this fight should have been stopped. Up until the fifth, it was competitive. I had it 3-1 for Bahalio going into the fifth. Two of the other judges did. A lot of people had it 2-2. That's just fine. First round to, I'll get into some of the details in a minute, but first round to Bahalio, second round to Cannonier, third round to Bahalio. The fourth was just super close. So I thought Bahalio edged it out, but if you weighted Cannonier's, if you thought Cannonier's strikes were more effective than I did, or more impactful, then you lean towards him, and that's perfectly fair. Then the fifth is actually going a little bit even again. Before Bahalio lands a 1-2, Cannonier slumps over. What's the third that was super close? No, it was the fourth. Because Cannonier was winning the even rounds. It was kind of how that had played out. 1-2 from Bahalio against the fence. The way Cannonier fell should have been stopped. Really should have been stopped. He gets on top and he throws a flurry, and Cannonier does a decent enough job covering up for the referee who just wanted blood, I guess. Cannonier does see out the round, but 10-8, pretty clear. There was some really interesting stuff in this fight. For middleweights, this was good work from both guys. Middleweight's a very hit and miss division. What I like out of Bahalio. Good lead hand fighting. Both guys will do some stance switching, but they spent the majority of this fight, I think if we were to clock it out, Bahalio was southpaw and Cannonier was orthodox. They both went southpaw at a few points. They both went orthodox at a few points. Bahalio seemed to just prefer to be open stance, I think. He switched his mind on that a little bit once he saw kind of what Cannonier's plan was from southpaw. But when they were open stance, really good lead hand fighting out of Bahalio. It opened up his jab. He landed some really nice calf kicks. In fact, there's a couple of times when he just would like step back from southpaw to orthodox. Cannonier would close distance a little bit, eat a calf kick, and Bahalio would circle away from a punch, reset, go back to southpaw. Some really good stuff there. Cannonier, once he gets going forward, is very dangerous. He landed some really quality hooks, opened up a really gnarly cut. Not really gnarly, but opened up a non-trivial cut under Bahalio's right eye. It wasn't a fight stopper or anything, but definitely going to be... That's going to be a scar. That's going to be a mark. He's going to remember that one. They both got wobbled at different points. Cannonier landed, I think it was a right hand in the... one of the close rounds. No, he got wobbled in one of those. That's why I went the way I did on the score. I think it was the second that he kind of bothered Bahalio with something. Cannonier out of southpaw, just very right hook heavy. Not that his left hand is some kind of weak weapon, but that was really what he was leaning on in that stance as his dominant weapon of choice, was the right hook. I think that's kind of why Bahalio went to match his southpaw stance when he went southpaw. Part of the reason you will fight open stance is to put maximum distance between the power hand of your opponent and the target, which is your face. And when the dominant weapon becomes the lead hand, um, going closed stance gives you more distance between and a little bit clearer vision of what's coming. So a lot of what Bahalia was doing defensively was kind of based around avoiding the right hook, especially when Kennedy went southpaw. Just a pretty good overall high-level fight. Some really nice kicking from Bahalio. The calf kicks were really good. Really quite strong. Good punches. Bahalio's 1-2 when he gets it going is really sharp, really straight. And he's good about his entries into... we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to Wang Tong and Leonardo. But Bahalio is very good when he goes forward about finding an angle he likes to enter and not just kind of coming in straight. I mean, there's a degree to which you always have to come in on something of a straight line because you're kind of getting from point A to point B. And even if you circle, that last bit is still going to be a bit more linear. But when you hear people talk about coming in on a straight line, it's more when you're like straight squared up with your opponent. Or when you're in any kind of disadvantageous stance related to them. If you come in straight instead of trying to change the angle relative to your opponent's weaponry, you're just asking for trouble. And even exceptional fighters occasionally get caught with one of those. But Bahalio, pretty darn good about making sure he entered on an angle that he liked. And his jab was money. Just really solid fundamentals. Really good performance from him. This was a non-trivial step up for him in class. And after the fight, says he wants the next title shot. That seems unlikely. He will probably be in the top 5 of the rankings after this. Or very close to it, if not. The problem he's going to run into if he wants to fight Dricus du Plessis next is... Actually, well, one, that's actually a very good fight, I think. Because Bahalio is he's very kind of technically sound. He's not like a brilliant technician, but he's a very good mechanic. And him against a guy who is very unorthodox, those tend to make for interesting fights. But you've got Sean Strickland waiting in the wings, who you could easily have scored the fight between Strickland and du Plessis for Strickland. He did the UFC kind of a solid with the Paulo Costa fight. So that's on the table. We're still waiting to see what happens with Whitaker and Chimaev. Whitaker needs another spectacular performance, but even DDP's out there going, yeah, Whitaker should be next. He's kind of being overlooked. So we're waiting to see how that one plays out. And Bahalio's just... He's not going to be next in the planning phase, but depending on injury, scheduling, and whatnot, it would not be outside the realm of possibility for him to get a shot. But like 2 other people have to be unavailable, which is absolutely possible given how the UFC operates. I think more likely he fights... There's a decent chance he fights Adesanya. If Izzy sticks around at middleweight, which is not necessarily a guarantee, but yeah, Bahalio's going to jump pretty high, fairly, I think. But he's probably going to need one more. It's either going to be Adesanya or maybe Nasruddin Imavov. Would be kind of the 2 names now ranked above him that would be sort of in play. I think Imavov has a fight coming up, so if Imavov wins, I don't know. There's a handful of moving pieces here. Ultimately, I don't think Bahalio is the next title challenger, but he's very close. And there's a pretty decent chance he gets that belt. I'm not downplaying Duplessis or Strickland or anyone else, but Kyle Bahalio is very good. Tough loss for Cannonier. He's 40. When was his last fight? I swear the Imavov fight was earlier. It was just in June, actually. Jeez. It was a quick turnaround for him. I mean, I know a lot of people weren't happy with the Imavov stoppage. But this quick a turnaround from that, I don't know. Probably not going to fight again for the rest of the year, would be my hunch. He's going to drop in the rankings. He's fought a lot of guys already. I mean, he's been around for a bit. You know, that's one of the things about Cannonier. His middleweight run, Dave Branch, Anderson Silva, Jack Hermanson, Robert Whittaker, Calvin Gastelum, Derek Brunson, Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland, Marvin Vettori, Imavov, and Bahalio. So, who could be... You could do him and Paulo Costa. I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. Roman Dolidze's hanging around. I mean, he already beat Jack Hermanson, otherwise that might be in play. Beat Marvin Vettori too, right? Did I mention Vettori? Yeah, he beat Marvin Vettori. So, probably looking at someone like Costa. We've got a fight coming up between Michel Pereira and Anthony Hernandez. Winner of that might also be in play. That's a good fight. That's going to main event the October 19th card. So, winner of that could fight Cannonier. So we'll see. Still a few things in the air, but Cannonier should not be in any great hurry to get back. As I said, this should have been stopped. So take a bit, fully recover, come back, and he's going to be looking at Pereira, Hernandez, or Costa. I think would be the ones that are most likely as things currently stand. Co-main event, Tabitha Ricci defeats Angela Hill via unanimous decision, 29-20 across the boards. Ricci takes 1 and 2. Hill takes the third. Pretty crazy pace between these two. I'll give them that. Not the cleanest work, but Ricci just able to do enough more than Hill in 1 and 2. I don't have a whole lot here other than like boneheadedly kicking myself for picking Angela Hill. Here's why I should have changed my mind. Because Angela, it wouldn't have mattered. You know what? I have a hunch. It wouldn't have mattered. If I'd picked Ricci, they would have had basically the same fight, but Hill would have won. Like you tweak a few things here, and Hill might get the split decision. So you're just gonna bust my bracket either way. Is kind of my thought. Solid enough win for Ricci. Then we had the tough finale. Ryan Loder defeated Robert Valentin via elbows from the mounted crucifix, 149 of the second. Valentin's a little bit of a madman. I say that with respect. Loder, a pretty dominant wrestler, actually. He got a decent takedown fairly early. Valentin started with an active guard, threw up a pretty high triangle. A couple of decent scrambles, but Loder caught Valentin in what looked like a scarf hold arm lock. It was kind of from side control, and if you've never, it could also be. No, he couldn't. There's another way to do it that cranks slightly differently. It's a more like almost an Americana with the legs while you're holding the Kesagatami scarf hold position. This one I think was a bit more straightened, but either way, scarf hold. You catch their arm between your legs, and then you can kind of crank on it a little bit. And he said he heard the elbow pop, and Valentin actually like iced up his arm a little bit between rounds. So I'm sure the fact that that was compromised played into the second. Loder again gets a takedown, has a nice little bit of riding. Ultimately pushes Valentin over, gets the mounted crucifix, drops enough elbows to get the stoppage. They weren't horrific, but Valentin couldn't get out. And if you can't get out of that position, there's no reason to let it continue. So, solid enough. A little bit of fighting from Loader. Um, More impressive, well, certainly more memorable. At featherweight, Myron Santos knocks out Khan Offley with a left hook at 103 of the second. Santos won this whole fight, man. He was winning the first round longer than Offley at any rate. Pretty good kicking game, some really nice front kicks that were bothering Offley. Anytime they clinched, he was pretty good about clinch breaking, not getting too tied up in the grappling. Started landing his right hand. Second round, lands a right hand, and Offley is bothered by it, but decides, all right, his reaction to being hurt seemed to be, well, I'm going forward and I'm swinging, and they get close to the pocket. Both swing left hooks, but Offley's misses, and he's a little bit hurt and kind of out of position, and his defense isn't where it needs to be to hook in the pocket. And Santos ends him with a left hook. Similar-ish to the double punches from... There's a famous one with Ramon Decker, and I forget the gentleman he was fighting in Muay Thai. MMA fans might be more familiar with Carlos Condit and Dan Hardy. That kind of thing, not exactly that, but kind of. Cody Garbrandt and Pedro Munoz had a dozen of these exchanges when they fought. So just Santos landed better, had been winning the whole thing up until then. Offley drops to his knees. Like sometimes when guys get knocked out, the strings above them kind of get cut, so to speak, and dropped to his knees, ate a couple of perfunctory punches, and then slumped over. Really, really good stuff out of Myron Santos here. Featherweight's a tough division to try and make your way in, but this was a really good introduction to him. At welterweight, speaking of good work, Michael Morales defeats Neil Magny via TKO. Punches from back mount. 439 of the first. This was the other pick I was kind of sweating, believe it or not, because fight starts and Neil Magny just does not know how to deal with calf kicks, man. I don't know if it's a timing thing. I don't know if it's a... Some of it's his stance. He's not fully upright. That's not what I mean to say here, but his posture is a bit rigid, especially from the waist up. It's not erect and upright, but it doesn't have a lot of fluidity to it in how he moves. And he keeps it's a slightly more boxing kind of stance because he does a lot of jabbing, is normally what he does. And it just leaves that lead leg a little vulnerable. And it's been a problem for him for a while. And I don't know if he just won't adjust his stance. Jack Slack joked that Neil Magny's strategy to deal with calf kicks is just to lose the fight. And then there's a 70% chance that the next guy he fights won't know how to use them. And it's a little glib, but, it speaks to the pattern. So a couple of really gnarly, really solid calf kicks from Morales. Then Magny is able to push forward, get a clinch, gets to the back in the clinch, and it's starting to look like a Neil Magny fight. I don't say that with, any shade. But I've watched Neil Magny's entire UFC career. I know what a Neil Magny fight looks like when it's going his way. This is kind of what it looks like. So he gets to the back, and he's working for mat returns. Can't quite find them. Few knees to the, leg. But Morales is struggling to kind of get out of the position. Eventually, he does break the grip. Then, interestingly enough, when he normally when you break the grip, you kind of circle towards the side that you've broken. So Magny's right arm was still kind of around the waist of Morales, and he had his left arm was the one that Morales had attacked. And because when you want to break that grip, you tend to go 2-on-1. Either you can use a Kimura grip, you can just push at it, but you want to go 2-on-1 unless there's a comical strength disadvantage. So breaks the grip. Instead of going that direction, He actually spins the other. You would spin the same way he spun, but well, I can't describe this very well. Normally, you don't show more of your back once you get that going. You want to put some more pressure on the grip. And Morales decided, no, I'm going to spin. Spun back, so to his own right. So he's throwing if his face is 12 o'clock. His opening to escape would be rotating and moving counterclockwise to his left. And instead he spins to his right, so clockwise, throws a spinning elbow that Neil Magny clearly did not see or expect, drops him with it, gets on top, passes to full mount, lands punches, Magny gets up the back, gets the hooks, flattens him out, more punches, gets the stoppage. Yeah. Michael Morales still undefeated, young guy. Um, Neil Magny is a stern test. And beating him means something. Still a few things that Magny, even in the as long as this lasted, that Magny kind of showed, hey, you might want to be quicker about this. And there's a few bits of decision making and experience that Morales still has to get, but some of that you only get via experience and actually getting in there. He's very good. He's definitely in the ascendancy, I think. Welterweight has started to slowly come along a little bit. You've got Bilal Muhammad's an older champion. He's, what, 35, 36? You've got a few younger guys coming up. Guys like Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now you can add Michael Morales to that list. Given his prominence in the promotional side of things, you can't discount Ian Gary, even if I don't think he's likely to win the belt. And it's not like Leon Edwards is some old guy. He's actually younger than Muhammad. But there does seem to finally be a crop of younger rising welterweights that are able to push through some of the old guard. And credit to Morales for being able to do that. Really good performance from him. And kicking off the main card, because I don't pick Edmund Shabazian to win fights. If you want to know why, watch this one. Gerald Meerschaert, arm triangle at 4:12 of the second over Shabazian. Pretty good first round from Shabazian. Both men showing some kicks. Meerschaert has a really good left body kick, and he doesn't mind throwing it a little bit. Lazy is the wrong word. But you can tell guys who, if they're good, and they leave their kick hanging after they throw it instead of quickly retracting it, it's because they don't really care if you take them down. So Meerschaert's kick, his left leg kicking game, part of its efficacy is that some of his technique is, I don't care if you catch this, because go ahead and take me down, I'd rather be on the ground anyway. But he was a little bit behind the eight ball for most of this. Shabazian landed a couple of punches, but Meerschaert had a decent read on his offense. Still got hit, still lost the round, but nothing landed like seriously. And Shabazian after the first round is not the same problem that he is in the first, even if he has a good first round. Which isn't to say he was having a bad second. He was doing okay in the second, but he wasn't able to find a legitimate kill shot. He does hurt Meerschaert to the body with a kind of a right uppercut to the solar plexus that bothers Meerschaert. Then Meerschaert looks to tie up, winds up just like pulling guard, basically, or half guard. Shabazian couldn't do much there. Meerschaert's able to sweep, get on top, grabs an arm triangle choke. Beautiful leg pummeling from Meerschaert. Once he gets the arms in position, stopping his passing and, again, the leg pummeling is really hard. He's very, very good at that. Gets over to half guard on the dangerous side, the side with the choke, forces the tap. This makes Gerald Meerschaert the most prolific finisher in the middleweight division. He now has more finishes in the division than Anderson Silva. He's also got the most submission wins in middleweight division history. And you know what? Good for him. And I mean that sincerely. Good for him. He then called out Paul Craig. Thumbs up for me, man. Yes, go for it. That fight makes all the sense in the world. Two slightly ungainly looking guys who are much more about grappling than striking. Yeah, that's a very good fight to make. Go for it. For Shabazian, tough loss, but he's had several of those. Shabazian's striking is pretty darn good, but his gas tank is an issue, and he's become okay at stopping takedowns. Certainly at stopping single shot takedowns, which Mershard is not much of a chain wrestler. But if Shabazian gets taken down, his ability to regain his feet from there is, I mean, I hate to say non-existent because I feel like that does him too much of a disservice, but it is. You would be forgiven for thinking it's non-existent looking at several of his fights. That is just not a thing he, for whatever reason, is all that good at. And some of that's the guys he's fought. I get it. Getting out from under Derek Brunson is not the easiest thing in the world. Getting out from under Gerald Meerschaert, not the easiest thing in the world. Um, Getting away from Anthony Hernandez at all was very difficult. He just ragdolled him. Um, Jack Hermanson, really dominant wrestler. Like I understand that some of this is going to be skewed by the level of competition and the guys in particular that he's fought. But man, you've got to have developed that by now. How are you still not able to really get that part of your game going? It's just rough. But that's why I don't really pick him to win fights. Talent, guy who had a fair amount of potential, but the Glendale Fight Club, man, and Edmund Tarverdian, if you have a lot of natural fighting ability, he can kind of get you to the UFC, and you can even get some wins in the UFC. But once you get figured out, now I know that Shabazian left that team, and I'm going to make a different point. I'm going to bring my point back in a second. But once you get figured out, you stay figured out. And by the time he found a new camp, who's he with actually at the moment? I know it's not a little bit Extreme Couture. Okay, I think that would be the big one that he's kind of associated with. The part of the problem is like you have to then untrain certain. You know how long it takes to train a good fighter? To get someone who's kind of good, it takes years. Having to retool your game, and I don't think he had to retool from the ground up. I'm not going to say that, but having to significantly rework your game while fighting in the UFC after some of your deficiencies have been very exposed, that's a hill that like almost no one can climb. That's just too big an ask. Um, so I do wish him luck, but he wasted a lot of time with Tarverdian, and by the time he made the change, he was so far behind the eight ball that getting back on track is going to be a Herculean task. So that was your main card. No real complaints there. Ricci and Hill was kind of samey over 3 rounds. You watch the first round, you kind of have seen the whole fight. But Bahalio and Cannonier was really good. Couple of decent finishes in the tough finales, and then Morales and Meerschaert both got good wins. On the prelims, Francis Marshall defeats Dennis Bazookia via split decision. There's a 29-28 each way, and then a 30-27 for Marshall. There were some weird scorecards last night early on. This wasn't the weirdest one. We'll get to that, but I don't quite get the 30-27 for Marshall. That makes a little bit more sense to me, honestly, though, than giving Bazookia the second. He got dropped hard at the start of that round, and he fought his way back into the round, but he did not overcome that deficit. Middleweight Zach Reese defeated Jose Medina via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Reese seems to have some gas tank issues, but Medina got into the UFC apparently because in the Contender Series, though he lost, he just took a beating. And the UFC, I guess, brass decided, I guess they needed another designated heavy bag. He should not be here. I respect his toughness, but he is not ready for this level at the moment. Lightweight Vyacheslav Barsho defeated James Yontop via split decision. A 29-28 each way. I don't quite get scoring this for Yontop, but I don't think it's the end of the world. And then a 30-27 for Barshev. Not a great fight. Then in our What the Cluck scoring of the evening, Jacqueline Cavalcante defeats Josiane Nunes via split decision. This was announced weirdly. They announced 229-28 for Cavalcante, but the official scorecards that the UFC put out, I think, had one of the judges actually had it 30-27 for Cavalcante. I want to double check that real fast. Let me make sure I'm not talking out of my backside here. Yeah, like so. This was screwed up by either the ring announcer or something because the official scorecards posted on Twitter on the UFC's website. There's Sal D'Amato's 30. Yeah, Sal D'Amato was 30-27 for Cavalcante. I don't know why it was announced as 29-28, but that is an error. But our screwed up scorecard. So there's a Chris Lee 29-28 for Cavalcante gave Nunes the third. I don't think that's completely unfair. Sal D'Amato 30-27 for Cavalcante. If even that semi-sentient can of tomato soup is getting it right, then you need to understand how screwed up Ron McCarthy's 30-27 for Josiane Nunes is. What a catastrophe of a scorecard. That's almost as bad as that 30-27 for Tai Tuivasa. It's not quite that bad, but it's almost. You're in the same ballpark. You might be like third base to right field, but the ballpark. Terrible scorecard. Absolutely terrible. Cavalcante, she kind of played enough defense in the third that giving the third to Nunes I don't think is the worst thing in the world, but Nunes just really struggled to do much effective the whole fight. Cavalcante, longer tools, pretty good sticking and moving. And kicking off the entire card, Wang Kong defeats Victoria Leonardo via knockout 102 of the first round. Wong looked real good. Short fight, so bear in mind. Lots of unknowns, especially for she's only now 6-0. But moved well, pretty decent kicks. Then took a slight angle. As Leonardo enters the pocket, crushes her with a 1-2. Out cold. You don't see that very often. It's rare enough to find like striking knockout finishes at women's flyweight, much less with punches. Wong actually, they brought this up, does hold a kickboxing, or I think it was Muay Thai. She holds a kickboxing of some variety win over Valentina Shevchenko. I think that was Shevchenko's last kickboxing fight before she moved to the UFC. I don't mean MMA in general, I mean the UFC in particular. After the fight, she said, I don't like being the first fight of the night. Don't think I should have been. I want to be on the upcoming Macau card and put me on the main card. Not horribly unreasonable, but I think that cost her a bonus in the moment. It got fixed. Allegedly, this was fixed later, and Dana White gave her one of the $50,000 bonus. But complaining about your place on the card is not a good way to endear yourself to, especially lower level UFC brass. Dude, nobody was there for this card. Dana wasn't there. I don't think Mick Maynard was there. Uh, I don't know if Sean Shelby was there. When those two guys got their the tough winners, they didn't even get like. I think the last time they did this, Dana was there to do the congratulations, you're the Ultimate Fighter thing, and hand them the glass trophy, the whatever they give them. This one was a glass pillar basically. Like there's someone from the UFC brass to do the congratulations, you are the Ultimate Fighter, even though this is a canned speech at this point. Nobody was there. Nobody from the UFC officiating crew or the UFC executives was there to do anything. These poor guys had to just accept that from one of the Octagon girls. So UFC middle management not being thoroughly impressed with Wong's decision to be like, hey, why am I am so much better than being the curtain jerker to an Apex fight night. Kind of tracks for middle management in general, and there was enough pushback on social media to get Dana White to go, yeah, we're fixing that. I'm definitely sending her a bonus. So for whatever that's worth, which the promoter's word is very not worth a whole lot. But her nickname's the Joker, which is always a little, yeah. She showed up with Joker makeup to the ceremonial weigh-ins, but then not in like an over the, I mean, it's Joker makeup, so it's always going to be a little bit like pro wrestling. But she wasn't as over the top with it as even just like a Marcus Perez used to always do that. Hers was thankfully not wildly over the top. It's a little over the top because you're dressing up like the Joker. But this case, it honestly felt more like just a little bit of personality rather than leaning into too much into the gimmick, which is a weird distinction to make, but bear with me, I think that's true. Then goes out and starches this girl in 60 seconds. Like, way to make an impression. And I mean that sincerely. She came out as a pretty big winner out of this whole event. And that was the card. So your bonuses already mentioned. Fight of the night. Okay, apparently this did get made official. So fight of the night went to Bahalio and Cannonier. No complaints there. Performances initially were announced as just Morales and Mershart, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not objecting. But they did eventually bonus Wong. And frankly, Myron Santos got the short end of that stick. I mean, dude slept a guy. I was impressed with Morales' performance overall, and beating Neil Magny is more impressive than beating Con Offley, but those were not equal if we're just talking about like how great was the finish. So, slightly spoiled for choice as far as bonuses. But apart from poor Morales getting kind of left out, apart from poor Santos getting a little bit left out in the cold, it's not like the others weren't deserved. So my full report is in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Go give it a read if you're so inclined. I always appreciate it. All right. It took a little longer than I thought it was going to, actually, but that's how it rolls sometimes. Okay, let's move on. So news, Conor McGregor making noise on various social media outlets doing the Free McGregor, Free the Mac. I think he has seen where the grass is greener at this point, and it's not with the UFC. And the UFC is just not going to let him out of his contract. He's the biggest star they have. So Conor might be doing some public negotiation. That whole relationship just seems unsalvageable at this point. The UFC, somewhat understandably, being frustrated with Conor for pulling out of the Chandler fight. Conor being frustrated with the UFC. That whole thing has just turned very just not good, I think, on all parts. But once again, the UFC is not just going to let the guy walk and go box somewhere else. But it's rough. But we'll keep an eye on that as that situation continues to develop / deteriorate. We did get a few fight announcements. I already mentioned one of them. I mentioned Hernandez and Pereira for the October 19th card. The week before the October 12th card, we got our main event. Tatsuto Taira and Brandon Royval, and yes, please. That's going to be the scrambles those two could put on. The potential for that is high, very high. Nice to see flyweights main eventing these, even just the crappy Apex cards. That's a good fight. Let's give me a quick look at both of those cards. Let's see if there was anything on them that's been announced that's salvageable. The 12th card, the degenerates out there will be okay with Chris Barnett and Waldo Cortez Acosta. Ramazanbek Temirov's UFC debut is slightly interesting. Oh, they rebooked Jung Young Park and Brad Tavares, and I like the Iron Turtle, so I'll be okay with that. Not a lot beyond that. Nico Price and Temba Garimbo will be, a little bit donkey, but probably fun. Grant Dawson back in action. It's not great, but if you squint real hard, there's a few things kind of worth paying attention to. Currently, that 19th card, it's got fewer fights announced, so a little bit of slack should be cut here, but that's a bit rougher. Michel Pereira and Anthony Hernandez is a very good fight. I am very interested in that. Pereira at middleweight has been kind of a beast, and Anthony Hernandez doesn't get a lot of play, doesn't get a lot of talk, but he's very good. And Matthews, Nicolau, and Asu Almabayev. I don't hate that. Rob Font and Kyler Phillips should be fun. Heavyweights. Oh, we exposed Robelas to Spain, so let's give him a gimme fight against Austin Lane. Yeah. Okay, that card needs help. Font and Phillips is good. And because I'm kind of interested in Nicolau and Almabayev, but if you're looking for the second, most interesting thing there, Font and Phillips actually has legitimate potential. Okay. Anything else get announced recently? Sean O'Malley's whining. But what else is new? Already knew about Moicano and Saint-Denis. That November 9th card have much announced? I don't think we have a main event there. No, we absolutely do not have a main event out of that. What's announced there, but that's okay. It's November. There's plenty of time for that to get sorted. Okay. I think that's all for Friday announcements. So let me check the old X machine, and we'll see if anything crazy MMA related is broken. If not, we'll do plugs and get out of here and be right about the hour mark. Woohoo! Okay. Nope, nothing new there. So plugs. Earlier today, I covered AEW's All In. They were in Wembley. It was a good show, ups and downs, phenomenal main event. There's 3 matches if you like pro wrestling. Tony Storm and Mariah May was very good. MJF and Will Ospreay was predictably very good, and Bryan Danielson and Swerve Strickland was freaking great. There were some duds on that card too, but when you have that many matches, you're not gonna bat 1,000. Nobody does when you have that many matches. It's just too much. But full report over there in the Wrestling Zone of 411mania.com if you're interested. This week, Monday, when you're probably listening to this, Damn You Hollywood will be tackling the Crow remake. What a catastrophe that seems to be. Then I will have WWE SmackDown on Friday and no UFC event on Saturday. We are having a week off, so I don't know what I will do with that week. I will probably waste my Saturday doing nothing. Or rewatching fights, because I'm a degenerate. Alright. Next week we will be back here to preview UFC on ESPN. Uh, is this UFC on ESPN plus 100? It might be. I'll have to double check that when we get closer. It's that or it's UFC on ESPN 63, so we'll see. Headlined by Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady. That's a good fight. How does the rest of this card look? Not all that good. Yeah, that's gonna be a dog. That's just. I might be missing the first couple of fights for that card too. I got a thing that Saturday, and I'm. Oh no, I might miss Andre Petrovsky or Yi Jia. I'm not gonna lose sleep over that. I can go back and edit them and watch them after the fact anyway. It's not like a big deal. But I might be missing the first few of those live. I'll know more next week. So, I mean, I'll still pick them, so don't worry about that. But yeah. All right. So next week we'll preview that and all the other stuff. Y'all know the drill. So that's it for me this week. Thank you again for listening. I appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there. World's getting crazier and crazier. So stay safe, seriously. And until next time, be well, be safe, and behave.